This is just a quick video to get us through this process until we can make a better one. When you're sewing the mesh and the ripstop together, first thing you're going to do is lay the mesh down so you can see the label and the envelope. Then the ripstop goes on top of it with the chest pocket facing down. So your pockets are together, in between, right sides together. Pins go all the way around the outside edges. This one has already been partially sewn. You can see the pins on around the armhole. We have found that the pins stay much more secure if you put them through the fabric twice instead of once like we usually do. Once you have it pinned all the way around, including around where these side vents are sewn, then you're ready to sew. We've found that generally, but not always, it works the best to sew across the bottom first. And you can do it with a serger or a straight stitch. And then to do the two front edges. There we go. The two front edges you can do with a serger or a straight stitch machine. Try to use about a 1/2 inch or a 5/8 inch seam allowance. And then do the side vents. Now, these need to be sewn twice. And you're going to sew as closely as you can on the second time over the top of the first stitching that you did. That's to reinforce it and strengthen that side vent, which gets a lot of stress. So, especially up in the corner here, that's the most high stress point. If you want to do a shorter stitch length around the top of that corner, that will also make it stronger. And that obviously is done with a straight stitch machine. Then the last part that needs to be done is to serge. This part we do want done with a serger. If you don't have a serger, you can send it back to us and at this point, we'll give it to someone else that has a serger or access to one. And so you'll serge around those two armhole curves. The shoulder edge and the neck edges stay open at this point. So once you get all of those seams sewn, it's ready to stuff the foam inside. I want to mention a few tips that we found to be helpful when you're doing this step. The mesh on the back is stretchy and the ripstop shell is not stretchy. So one of the challenges is sewing a stretchy fabric to a non-stretchy fabric. You can see that the mesh will tend to pucker and pull a little bit. The easiest way that I have found to accommodate the stretchy and the non-stretchy is to put the stretchy on the bottom. So the mesh will be next to your feed dogs and the ripstop will be facing up as you sew. It doesn't always work the best for everyone that way, but that's something that I have found helpful. Another thing is as you're sewing, you can add extra pins to make it more secure, but also if you pull on this while the feed dogs are pulling it this way, it will gather and pucker the mesh underneath. So if anything, you need to help it under the foot so that it doesn't pucker up underneath. Another thing is if the mesh is a little bit bigger than the ripstop, you can put a little bit of tension on it as it's going through, and the feed dogs will ease the extra mesh into that seam. Some people have found a walking foot helps in sewing these two different fabrics together. You just can experiment and see what works best for you. If you're struggling with it and not having a good experience, bring it back to us, because we'd rather have you finish and say, that was great, I want to do more, than have you finish and say, I am never doing that again. So if you're not loving this part, bring it back to us and we'll give you something else that you will love, so you'll want to help us some more. And then at the end, flip the whole thing over. Double check and make sure it lays fairly flat. You can see here where some of the fabric was not laid flat or got puckered. This one is a classic example of someone pulling on it while they're sewing and it makes it pucker like that. If it lays fairly flat, don't undo it. And last tip for helping us with every single step of this project in sewing these vests, please use a medium or long stitch length. There's several reasons for this. One is it's more forgiving if you have to unpick. If I tried to unpick some of these, it will leave holes in the fabric if a very short stitch length is used, which we can repair, but I'd rather not. So if you use a medium to long stitch length, it's more forgiving. We're using a heavier thread so that it's a stronger stitch. And the third reason is when you start sewing anything that has the foam in it, we need the sewing to hold the foam in place. And if you use a short stitch length, it's just going to perforate the foam so that it rips and tears. I think that's all for now. And again, good luck, and if it's not working for you, give it back to us and we'll give you something different. Thank you so much.